Adam, what
Joel?
is your favorite year?
This year.
I would say it's 1968. Adam, what is your favorite animal? The crawfish. The crawfish is Adam's favorite animal. What do both of those things have in common? Maybe Mafia 3. Oh my God. Is Mafia 3 in the house? I think they are. Gus?
Flawless delivery, as always, by Joel Heyman.
Joel's segues
amazing.
are just getting more grasping. It's very convenient, Adam, that the crawfish was your favorite animal.
So convenient.
That's just so convenient that it worked out that way.
So welcome, everyone. We're kicking off our Rooster Teeth at E3, presented by Jason Bourne coverage. Day 3, final day. We're joined by Hayden, who's a studio head over at Hangar 13.
Hey, guys.
For the guys working on Mafia 3. And we were chatting, right before we started streaming here, and Bernie and I were saying that the booth y'all have here this year showing off the game is absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
it's like
crazy.
It's pretty impressive.
It's like a recreation of, I guess, like your version of the French Quarter, and it's
Yeah,
just
that's
like
right.
huge. And
Yeah, I mean, the goal was to make, as soon as people walked in, make them feel like they were in New Bordeaux, which is our version of New Orleans, you know, and really get them primed to, again, see the Mafia presentation. So, and I think, they did a great job. It's fantastic.
It's such a great setting, too. It's like, it's your interpretation of New Orleans,
Right,
essentially. But that city's so great and so prime for, just something that's, the tone of Mafia, the
Right.
franchise. I mean, every time I go there, I feel it's part of the reason why I play these games is to take part in a world that I don't take part in my everyday life.
Exactly, yeah,
And I feel like
totally.
New Orleans feels like that when I go
Right.
there.
Yeah, no, and that was huge for us. Like, when I first started working on the project, kind of took a step back and said, what does Mafia mean to me, and what does the franchise mean? And one of the pillars that we came up with is a key part of Mafia and the previous games is a city that feels like a main character. So it was super important for us to find that city that we could latch onto, and so using New Orleans as inspiration has been perfect.
so, you talk about using New Orleans as an inspiration. What other kinds of inspirations do you draw from, like when you're talking, when you're approaching making a game like this?
Everything. I mean, so again, the city was obviously a huge part of it. The music of the era is a huge part of it, just constantly playing. I mean, we've got Spotify lists of 1968 tunes that help inspire us. But it was a lot of film as well. We like to talk about how if Mafia 2 was very inspired by kind of the first half of Goodfellas and that kind of romanticized view of the mob, we're more the second half of Goodfellas when things are starting to crumble a little bit around the old school Italian mob, and you're starting to see kind of the cracks there. We framed the game as a documentary, so the narrative is told through kind of this documentary treatment. So we looked at a ton of documentaries. Cocaine Cowboys is one about the rise of cocaine in Miami.
That one, yeah.
So that was a really big inspiration for us in terms of the way that we're telling the story, and then just lots of TV. True Detective, even though it's not the right time period, it's still the first series was very inspirational for us just in terms of tone. Justified, which is a fantastic show, and just the language that they use. So anything we can get our hands on, we use as inspiration.
So when I watch a lot of movies about organized crime, I mean, one of the things from the early era is that it was organized and there was a system in place. There was almost like, in an odd way, a nobility to it. And then what I always notice in the history of organized crime is that as things turned, that the younger generation was more violent.
Right.
All the rules were kind of thrown out. So does Mafia 3 kind of go in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. That again, once we figured out that we were going to be set in the 60s and 68 in particular, we really wanted to show kind of the erosion of the golden age of the mob. And and I don't know that they ever weren't violent, but before kind of the 60s, the attitude towards the mob was like, oh, they're a social. If people even acknowledged they existed, it was like they're a social club. They're involved in like the victimless crimes, which there's no such thing, but the fun stuff like gambling and bootlegging or whatever. But by the late 60s, heroin was becoming a bigger deal. There was a lot more influx of drugs. The violence started to spill out from kind of the back rooms and the back patio of a restaurant or whatever into kind of more of the streets, and then you had other competing criminal groups trying to kind of take the mantle, and so we wanted to show all that in the game if we could, which is why we focus on the particular protagonist. We have Lincoln, who is a member of the black mob and goes to war with the Italian mob.
So I do want to remind everyone who's watching right now that if you have any questions, you can use hashtag RTE3 on Twitter to communicate with us.
We'll be watching.
You can also communicate via the chat on YouTube. We're monitoring both of them, and so if there's anything good in there, we'll pull it out.
Or you can just stand up wherever you are and yell at the top of your lungs.
Maybe we'll hear it if you're
It's
right
possible.
around us.
Anything.
Yeah.
So
do what you got to do.
You mentioned tying, of course, Vito Scaletta's back from
Right.
Mafia 2 and Mafia 3, and he's one of Lincoln's allies. Are you And I think this game takes place, what, like 2 decades after the last?
Yeah, they're about
Mafia?
yeah.
You know, how is that all being tied together? You know, what is the reasoning for that?
Well, so another really important thing for me was to start to establish that there's a Mafia universe, right? That all these things from the games take place in the same, world, right? So in our world, we have New Bordeaux, but Empire Bay also exists from, Mafia 2. But what's been going on with Vito since Mafia 2, he at the end of Mafia 2, he gets kind of shipped out or exiled from Empire Bay, really to protect him, but he doesn't quite see it that way. And he gets sent down to New Bordeaux. And Leo Galante, who's the head of kind of the commission and was the one that exiled, Vito, basically contacts Sal Marcano, who's the head mobster in New Bordeaux, and says, hey, I want you to take this guy under your wing. I want you to, give him a little piece of the action, give him a part of the city to run, do me a solid. Vito gets down there, and Sal...
Can you tell us a little bit about what we're seeing here?
Yeah, sure. So this is our mobile store in the game. It's actually a gun runner who provides Lincoln with gear. Somebody that was introduced to Lincoln by Cassandra, who's one of Lincoln's underbosses in the game. What Lincoln's doing here now is he's going after a guy named Oscar Sabato, who is a pimp who works for one of the Marcano capos, a guy named Uncle Lou. And this is really kind of an integral part of the game. In order to make progress, the player tackles the rackets and the operations that are run by the various lieutenants and capos of the Italian mob and kind of works his way up. So here, by killing this pimp, Lincoln will do about 15 grand in terms of damage to the racket. He does enough of that, and he unlocks the ability to go after lieutenants. Yeah, so he killed Oscar. This is kind of my favorite approach, is to kind of sneak in first to make sure that Oscar's really dead, and then kind of blasting my way out. But again, players can go in guns blazing. They can go in with grenades. They can stealth the whole thing. Go in with silenced pistol. There's a little alley there that you can drive a car into. That's also really fun to do. We try to make the car a weapon in the game, and you can kind of rocket into enemies.
It's so funny you say that, because I never specifically play what are called stealth games,
right.
But whenever I play open world games, it's funny to me. Yeah.
I like the idea of assigning a monetary value to targets,
right,
and then
right.
trying to approach it from the angle of causing that amount of damage or hurting them in their pocketbook.
Yeah,
but
everything
it's interesting
revolves
to see
around
that,
Monday.
though, too, when it pops up, the monetary damage. I'm wondering if like a hitman took us out, guys. So, like, what would pop up for you?
Like $20, $25, somewhere around there.
I would be a coupon. Buy one, get one free.
So on Twitter, AH Shoalb, I don't know how to say that, asks, does Mafia 3 require me to play the prequels, or is this a new experience altogether that holds its own?
Yeah, it's a new experience. I mean, obviously, if you, we would love people to play Mafia 1 and 2, but you don't have to have any prior knowledge of the universe or of gameplay mechanics or the story to enjoy Mafia 3. We reintroduce Vito, for example. We reintroduce Leo, and you don't have to have any understanding of what came before. I will say that if you are a fan of Mafia 2 in particular, there's a couple more than Easter eggs, even some loose ends from Mafia 2 that weren't quite tied up completely that we do address in Mafia 3. So for the hardcore fan of Mafia 2, the question about what happened to Joe will be answered if you play the game.
And there's still time to play Mafia 2 before Mafia 3 comes
There
out.
is still plenty of time.
What
to
is
play
the
Mafia
release
2.
date right now for
October
the game?
7th.
October 7th. So,
yeah.
I mean, come on. You can do it. Get
Yeah.
out there and play it.
Yeah.
And there's actually an interesting connection. We're doing all the E3 coverage for YouTube, but a lot of people watching are also fans of Rooster Teeth, and there's a connection between Mafia 2 and our gaming group, Achievement Hunter, because when they were playing through the game Mafia 2, they noticed there was a lot of F-bombs.
Right.
And so they did a supercut of all the F-bombs, and they looked up, what's the game that has the most amount of F-bombs?
Right.
Bombs, and the record at the time was 189.
Wow.
And they were like, Mafia 2 blows that away.
Yeah.
And so they made the video, and they said, on the video, they said, Guinness Book of World Records, get on this.
Yeah.
And Mafia 2 ended up getting a Guinness Book of World Records.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe, I don't know if that one hangs on the wall.
It's a great honor.
It is. Yeah. I can say we might beat it with Mafia 3. We didn't go out of our way. I would be fair to the writers. They didn't go out of their way to make that a goal, but we're trying to be really authentic to the time period.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with guys that are all criminals, and everything's very heightened for them. They're involved in a very violent situation, and so we don't shy away from the language. I mean, that's definitely a big part of the game.
I don't think anything the genre does. I mean,
Yeah.
it's definitely was part of the culture. It continues, I'm assuming, in organized crime today, continues to be part of the culture. But
Yeah,
like
I
you
would
said,
assume,
Goodfellas is an inspiration.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, the TV cut of that, I think, is about 4 minutes long.
Yeah.
So,
It's always disappointing when I flip through the channels and I see it on. I start watching it like, oh no, wait, I don't want to watch this.
That's a Blu-ray rental.
But why, when you were dealing this with approaching Mafia 3, why did you decide to go with like the new Bordeaux setting, and why the time period? Why the 60s? What does that play into the story?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we wanted to keep moving Mafia forward in time, which was tradition for Mafia 1 and 2. So that was a no-brainer to kind of move it forward in time. Picking the particular year was a little bit tough. We went back and forth, but we knew we wanted Lincoln's mission and his story to be have a sense of urgency. So take place in a relatively short amount of time. It takes place over the course of about 9 months in the game. And then when we just started doing our research, 68 is such a turbulent year. It has, this backdrop of violence with, the Martin Luther King assassination, Robert Kennedy, Vietnam. On a personal note, it was the year that my dad came home from Vietnam. So he was drafted. He came home from Vietnam in 1968, and actually January, which is about the time that Lincoln comes home. So we were able to draw on, talking to him about what the country felt like and how it was like a powder keg. And
I was thinking that in my head. It's like the nation was like a powder keg.
Totally, yeah. And there was a sense that you could do, from what I've heard, not having lived through it, right? But the sense that, one thing could happen, some event could happen somewhere in the country and everything would just explode, right? So so we thought that was a really interesting backdrop. And then on the flip side of that, on the kind of the fun side, is looking at the music, right? So like, when do we get the best mix of music, and when was Paint It Black released or whatever, and can we include that? And then the muscle cars, that was another big thing, and I didn't realize this till I started doing research on the game. But there was only a really brief window of time where muscle cars were incredibly popular because of the gas shortages that came in the early 70s, right? And they fell out of favor as a result of that. So 68 everything kind of gelled at once, and it became kind of the perfect year for us.
Yeah, and it seems like you mentioned, that racial tension plays a large part into this game. Was that daunting to try to tackle? And it seems like it's a very, weighted issue.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it was daunting from the standpoint of, we wanted to do it justice, and we didn't want to get on a soapbox at the same time, right? I mean, so my direction of the team has always been like, look, just tell an authentic story, and let's create authentic characters, and kind of let the rest, sort itself out as we go. But when we look at Lincoln, there's kind of four things that we always talk about with him. He's an orphan. That's part of his backstory, which from a narrative standpoint gives us a really strong hook, because he's always looking for this place to belong. So he falls in with the mob. He goes off to Vietnam. He comes back, and he's still kind of searching for this place to belong, knowing that part of him probably will never get filled. He's a Vietnam vet, so that gives him special skills that allow him to take on the Italian mob, and as you saw in the clip, take on a half dozen guys or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, he is mixed race, so that has part of, obviously informs who he is and how the world treats him. And then the fourth one is he's a criminal, so we're not shying away from that either. I mean, he was part of the mob before he went to Vietnam. He comes back and falls back in with them, so he understands how criminal hierarchies work. So all four of those things are kind of equally weighted in our mind, but we don't shy away from any of them. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So, obviously the city of New Bordeaux is based on, inspired by New Orleans.
Yeah, right.
How big is the city in game? Is it, representative of the size of New Orleans?
So not block for block. One of the things that early on we decided that we didn't go with New Orleans because we wanted to kind of make a city that would support gameplay. So, we need, New Orleans is a fairly flat city, and because there's a lot of driving, we want hills, and, there's a lot of narrow streets or one-way streets or 90-degree turns in New Orleans, and that's not always conducive to driving at 100 miles an hour. So, so we took some liberties there. But it's a pretty expansive city, and the thing I'm excited, it's divided into 10 districts, and each with its own kind of distinct flavor and criminal ecology. But the thing that I'm really excited about is how dense kind of things are.
Sure.
Every square block feels like it has something to do or something to find. So that's interesting to us.
And we have up on screen here, we have one of these big set piece missions that Mafia is known for. Yeah. And they're on a steamship. I want to say a paddle boat. Is that the way?
It's a riverboat.
Riverboat,
yeah, it's a riverboat with a paddle wheel and a steam engine, I believe. But there's just big smokestacks on it. Yeah, so this is actually the culmination of what we were looking at earlier, where Lincoln is hitting Uncle Lou, as he's known around town, Uncle Lou's rackets. Eventually, Uncle Lou can't keep kicking up to his brother Sal, and gets into kind of trouble, hot water with Sal. So he agrees to hold a fundraiser for a crooked politician aboard this riverboat to kind of get in his brother's good graces again. Lincoln finds out about that, realizes, hey, this is a great opportunity for me to take out Lou, who's a really valuable capo. He rigs some explosive devices on a giant crane or a coal loader that stops the riverboat, and then he kind of infiltrates his way on. So again, this is another one of these missions where you can go in guns blazing, you can go in stealth. Again, I like to do a little bit of both here. We're about to see one of our
My stealth is
takedowns.
always stealth up to a point,
Well,
and then I just go nuts.
totally,
yeah, when I get discovered, then I just
Yeah.
start going nuts.
So we're trying to definitely support that, right? So you never feel like, oh my God, I failed, I got to go start over again,
Yeah.
right? So and Lincoln's not a ghost, right? He uses we don't even really call it stealth around the team. We say stalking, right?
Yeah,
He's more of a stalker, and he's trying to get himself in a position to take guys out, not completely avoid all confrontation.
Well, I have a really specific question here
Sure.
on Twitter from Mikey Rogers. He was asking from the previous clip that we showed. He took a screenshot of the numbers in the bottom left-hand corner, asking what did those specifically mean?
Oh, sure. Okay. And again, we've got a couple more months to release, so there may still be some tweaking to the UI as we go. But in the left-hand corner there, bottom left. Was that what he was asking?
Yeah, under the
yeah.
machine
So
gun.
you've got the obviously your two weapons. The player can carry two weapons, one hand and one two-handed, and all the ammo that are there. The one near the little plus sign is actually your adrenaline shots. So that's your basically your health regen. Then you've got your grenades. Lincoln can actually carry a couple different thrown explosives. So he's got grenades. He's got Molotov cocktails, which
There you go.
what he's throwing there.
That's if on cue.
Yeah, right. I actually timed that pretty well. Huh? He's also got a voodoo doll that's been rigged up by Cassandra's gun dealer to be like a distraction device. Tracks over the superstitious
I
Italian
was going to
mobsters.
ask if you guys went off the beaten path with like some of the culture of Cajun culture, like voodoo and things like that.
Yeah, so Cassandra's a member of the Haitian gang and the leader of the Haitian gang, but we really kind of depicted it in two ways where, there's voodoo, the religion, and she's an adherent to that. But then there's also the kind of voodoo for the tourists that she like plays up, and knowing that the Italian mob is superstitious, they her and Lincoln kind of devised this device that they can use to kind of
that's great.
Yeah. Then the other things you're seeing there, there's a little wallet icon, and that's the money that's actually in Lincoln's pocket right now. Player should probably go deposit that in his safe.
Yeah, he's doing well.
Before he dies. And then the next one is how much money is in his safe. And then the last one is a collectible that we use to kind of unlock different information in the game that he's collected as he's gone through the game.
Oh, that's great. Since there was questions about collectibles as
Yeah,
well.
there are.
I've got a follow-up actually
Sure.
here about collectibles. Looking at the YouTube chat, and Silly Narwhal asks, will there be Playboy collectibles like Mafia 2?
Yeah, we actually just announced that the other day. So we do have partnership with Playboy, and Playboy will be in the game, all from the 60s. So we're not revealing too much information about it yet, but we're doing a little bit more in terms of the content that we're including. From the previous game. So hopefully that'll be exciting. People will get a little bit more of a snapshot or look into what 1968 was like through some of our collectibles.
So Silly Narwhal, you must be very happy.
Yeah.
If
to
that
hear
is your
that
real
bit of
name.
information.
We hope we're pronouncing that correctly.
And there's another question here from Twitter on the RTE3 hashtag. Starship Pooper 1 asks, are we going to see car or weapon customizations?
So we have vehicle customization or vehicle upgrades as you go through the game. Lincoln has a small fleet of vehicles that he unlocks, and those can be upgraded over time with functional upgrades that also change the appearance of the car. So you can swap out the tires to get better grip or get bulletproof tires. Our cops are very aggressive in the game, and they'll shoot out your tires in many of the police chases. So that's an upgrade that players will probably want to invest in. You can get upgrade the engine, get better pipes on it, and all the cars get kind of cosmetic changes as you apply the functional upgrades to them.
I love the casual over-the-shoulder throw of that
just throw
Molotov
the
that he just
Molotov,
did. It's
yeah.
fantastic.
On the sniper up there.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's a real emphasis not only on gunplay in this game, but it seems like the hand-to-hand combat's also really visceral and getting it up close to your enemies.
Yeah, so our original idea with the kind of core gameplay was we very much wanted to make it a cover-based shooter in the open world, which in and of itself is kind of unique. But as we got further and further into development, we realized that Lincoln needed, at the very least, a panic button in case the player turned a corner and found an enemy there. And then as we kind of layered more and more on top of it, the melee really became a strong mechanic for us. So not only can you do the stealth takedowns as we saw there, but when you get up close and personal with somebody, you can do what we call normal takedowns, which are things that will take somebody out, but then we have more dramatic, brutal takedowns that stun everybody around, that witnesses the takedown. I've actually played that whole riverboat doing nothing but takedowns, just see if I
Nice.
could.
I like doing that sometimes
Yeah,
in games
right.
where you just try to do something a little different, like slightly different objective.
Yeah,
and,
right.
And approach it your own way.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff.
We had a question from Twitter too about the open world kind of wanted system of
Sure.
like your crime notoriety,
Yeah.
as you commit crimes. How does that work?
So again, because of who Lincoln is and the fact that it's 1968, we really wanted the police to be a pretty major force in the game and something that the player was always thinking about. And you can't really stand your ground with the cops in the game. That doesn't always, usually doesn't go well for Lincoln. So the way that the police are triggered in the game depends on where you're at, really, in the world. So if you're in a place like Delray Hollow, which is where Lincoln and his surrogate family lived before they're betrayed by the Italian mob, there's very few persistent police anywhere. So you can pretty much, commit crimes without the police witnessing it. If a civilian sees it, they'll run for a payphone or they'll try and find a persistent cop to report it to. But the response time in a place like the Hollow is really long, right? They don't care about that part of town. They don't show up very, very quickly. Conversely, if you go to like the northern end of town, which is Frisco Fields, is the kind of upscaled white neighborhood and has the mansions and the manicured lawns. There's persistent cops everywhere, right? So if you're walking around with your gun out, police response. If you assault a civilian, police response pretty quickly. And if a civilian sees it and they make it to a payphone and they call the cops respond really quickly.
Wow, it's a whole level of realism in the game that also ends up being a social commentary as well.
Yeah. And again, we weren't trying to get on a soapbox too much, but if we can make people think a little bit about like,
Sure.
why is it different here than it is there, and start to put two and two together, then I think we've kind of won. And then what happens over time is that as you commit more and more crimes within an area, the police are searching for you, and that search radius gets larger and larger, and the amount of time it remains is longer and longer as you do more, commit more crimes. And then we also give you the ability to kind of control the police system as well as you go through the game. If you invest territory in Burke, one of your lieutenants, he has a in with the police with a police dispatcher who will start feeding you information and doing things like calling off the cops if you kind of grease the wheels and
Right, sure.
yeah. So, yeah.
So has there anything been announced as far as co-op gameplay or anything along those lines?
We're very focused on single player experience, really telling Lincoln's story. So yeah, no, not at this point.
Well, I appreciate it when games really just focus on making the single player experience great. I think a lot of times multiplayer can get tacked on as an afterthought, and it's just never.
As our
never
first
good.
game out of the gate at Hangar 13, we were like, let's nail the story part and the open world part, and that's good enough for us right now.
That's a big reason why people play the Mafia franchise, right?
Well,
It's like the
and that
open
was
world.
important to me, yeah, for sure.
Well, it looks amazing so far. If people want to keep up with it, do you all have any social media or website
Yeah,
they can
so you
check
can go
out?
to mafiagame.com and then kind of follow the links from there to everything that we're doing. Yeah.
Great. And, of course, people can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Know, to keep up with the latest Mafia 3 information as it comes out. So thanks so much for joining us this morning, Hayden. We
Thank
really
you, guys.
appreciate it. We're so pumped for this game.
Thanks, I really appreciate it. I love talking about it, so thanks.
All right, I think we're going to throw back over to the sidecar over there with Joel and Adam.